Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy my new stories every day. It was a chilly evening in mid-October when I first noticed the crack in the perfect picture of our marriage. Rachel, my wife of 8 years, had always been the epitome of devotion and love. But lately, something had shifted. Her warm smiles were fewer, her absences longer. Going out with Jenny, she called over her shoulder, her tone dismissive, avoiding my gaze as she slipped into her coat. It was the third time this week, and each excuse felt more strained than the last. I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the road. My mind raced with doubts and confusion. It wasn't like her to leave without a kiss goodbye, without that sparkle in her eye that said she'd miss me. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in my gut. Driven by a mix of fear and suspicion, I grabbed my keys and followed her, keeping a safe distance. The city lights blurred past as I tailed her car through the bustling streets, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't me. I wasn't the type to spy on his wife. But the gnawing doubt left me no choice. The journey ended at a quaint, secluded cafe, not the place she'd usually visit with her friends. Parking a block away, I watched as she stepped out and looked around nervously before walking in. Taking a deep breath, I decided to confront whatever was waiting inside. As I approached, my pulse quickened. Through the fogged-up glass of the cafe, I saw them, Rachel and Michael, my best friends since college. They sat close, too close, laughing over shared secrets. My hand froze on the door handle as Michael leaned in, his hand finding her waist, and pulled her into a kiss that shattered my world. I stumbled back, the cold biting at my cheeks, mirroring the icy grip around my heart. Betrayal by my wife was hard enough, but with Michael? It felt like a cruel joke. The ride home was a blur of red lights and honking horns, but inside, everything was eerily silent. My mind replayed the scene over and over, her laughter, his touch, their lips meeting. By the time I reached our empty house, a plan was forming. The pain of betrayal was raw and deep, but it kindled a fire within me. I would not let this go. They had ruined the sanctity of our love, and for that, they would pay. Revenge would be mine. It was the only way to salvage what was left of my broken pride. The house was dark when I entered, the silence a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I went straight to our bedroom, pulling out the suitcase hidden under our bed. I packed silently, each fold of my clothes a crease in my resolve. Rachel returned home late, her steps hesitant as she opened the door. The living room was dim, lit only by the light spilling in from the hallway. "Tom, we need to talk," she began, her voice trembling. I stood, facing her, the suitcase by my side. "No, Rachel. I already know." The confusion on her face turned to horror as she realized what I had seen. "I'm sorry, Tom. I never meant for," her apology was cut short by my raised hand. "Save it. I've heard enough," I said, my voice cold and distant. "We're done here." With those final words, I grabbed my suitcase, leaving behind the shattered remnants of what we once called love. The night air felt sharp as I stepped outside, the path ahead uncertain but necessary. The first step of my revenge was simple. I would erase her from my life, just as she had erased our love with her betrayal. The rest would unfold in time, meticulously, painfully. She would understand the depth of my hurt, and she would regret ever crossing me. The morning after I left Rachel was gray and uninviting, the clouds overhead mirroring the turmoil inside me. I had spent the night at a nondescript motel on the outskirts of town, my thoughts racing as I plotted my next moves. By the time the sun peeked through the overcast sky, I was already on my way to Michael's apartment. The betrayal felt like a noose tightening around my neck, and confronting him was the only way to loosen its grip. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as his building came into view, a modern high-rise that stood arrogantly against the drab sky. I parked and made my way to his door, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. Before I could second-guess myself, I knocked sharply, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. It took only a moment for Michael to answer, his face dropping when he saw me. "Tom, I didn't expect you." "Clearly," I replied, my voice cold, stepping into his apartment uninvited. "We need to talk." Michael backed away as I closed the door behind me, his usual confidence nowhere in sight. "Listen, Tom, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "You think I'm just upset? You betrayed me, Michael. With Rachel." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting away. "I'm sorry, Tom. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call sleeping with your best friend's wife? A mistake?" Michael's face was pale, his usual charm stripped away by guilt. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't know what to say." "Save your apologies. We're beyond that now," I said sharply. "I want you to know that I'm not just walking away from this. You'll see the consequences of your actions." Fear flickered in his eyes as he took in my determined stance. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes," I replied darkly. "You destroyed everything. I'll make sure you lose just as much." Leaving him to stew in his fear, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The chill in the air matched the resolve settling deep within me. It was time for action, time to dismantle the lives they both took for granted. My first move was clear. I headed to my lawyer's office to initiate the divorce proceedings. The office was sterile and impersonal, the perfect backdrop for the dissolution of a once happy marriage. "Tom, are you sure about this?" my lawyer, Alan, asked as he reviewed the documents I had brought. His expression was one of concern, knowing the backstory of my marriage. "Absolutely," I stated, my tone leaving no room for debate. "I want everything handled quickly and cleanly. No loose ends." Alan nodded, understanding the finality in my voice. "I'll make sure Rachel gets served today. It will be handled discreetly." "Thank you, Alan. And one more thing," I added, pausing at the door. "Make sure she knows there's no chance for reconciliation. This is the end." As I left his office, the plan to dismantle Michael's life took shape in my mind. He had a career that could crumble with a few well-placed calls. His reputation was as fragile as the glass walls of his plush office. Revenge was a dark path, but as I walked back to my car, a grim satisfaction settled over me. They had chosen their fate the moment they betrayed me. Now, it was my turn to dictate how their stories ended. The days following my departure from Rachel's life were marked by a cold determination. My once routine existence transformed into a calculated series of actions aimed at retribution. I had isolated Michael's vulnerabilities, and now it was time to strike. First on my list was his professional life. Michael, a financial advisor, prided himself on his unblemished reputation. I knew a few whispers of doubt could initiate his downfall. Seated at a coffee shop with my laptop, I drafted anonymous tips to his firm's compliance department, hinting at unethical behavior. The emails were concise and laden with enough specific jargon to seem credible. I hit send, feeling the first real rush of control since the chaos began. As I sipped my coffee, watching the city hustle by, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel, her first attempt to reach out since the papers were served. "Tom, please, can we talk? There's more to this than you know." I stared at the message, the words blurring into a sea of anger. Without a moment's hesitation, I typed my response. "There's nothing left to discuss. You made your choice." Her reply came quick, tinged with desperation. "It's not just about us. It involves more than you think." I turned the phone off, unwilling to delve into her excuses. Whatever she claimed, it wouldn't change the facts. She had betrayed me, and she was no longer my concern. My focus had to remain on dismantling the life Michael had built. A couple of days passed before the results of my initial strike materialized. I received a call from an old mutual friend who was still in contact with Michael. "Hey, have you heard about Michael? He's been suspended pending an investigation. Something about irregularities in his accounts," he relayed, his voice a mix of shock and curiosity. "Really? That's surprising," I feigned ignorance, a smirk playing on my lips as I ended the call. Phase 1 was in motion, and the impact was just as satisfying as I had anticipated. Next, I turned my attention to Michael's personal life. Known in our circle for his lavish lifestyle, his image was everything. I reached out to several key social influencers within our community, subtly dropping hints about Michael's alleged indiscretions and financial misdealings. Rumors, especially juicy ones, had a way of spreading like wildfire. By the end of the week, Michael's once pristine image was smeared with speculation and doubt. I watched from the shadows as his social circle dwindled, the invitations dried up, and his social media became a battleground of accusations and defense. Yet, despite the satisfaction of seeing Michael's life crumble, a hollow feeling grew within me. Revenge hadn't brought the peace I expected. Instead, it magnified the emptiness of my victory. Alone in my motel room, the walls seemed to close in, the silence a stark reminder of the solitude my actions had wrought. The phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Alan, his voice grave. "Tom, there's been a development. Rachel is pushing back on the settlement. She's threatening to go public with some information she claims will affect you both personally and publicly." My heart skipped a beat. What did Rachel know? What could she possibly expose that would twist the knife even further? "Handle it, Alan. Keep it quiet, whatever it takes," I instructed, the weight of potential new threats settling in. As I hung up, the complexity of my revenge began to dawn on me. The network of lies, the calculated destruction, it was spiraling into more than just a vendetta. It was evolving into a war, with unseen casualties yet to be discovered. That night, as I lay awake, the shadows whispered doubts, and Rachel's words echoed in my mind. "There's more to this than you know." What secrets lay buried beneath our shattered lives? What had I unleashed? The pursuit of revenge, it seemed, was far from over. The air was thick with tension as I walked into the sterile conference room where the final meeting with Rachel was to take place. My mind was a whirlwind of scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. The veiled threats she had made through Alan hinted at a secret potent enough to sway the tides in her favor. I was ready to end this, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Rachel was already seated when I entered, her appearance far from the vibrant woman I had married. She looked worn, the stress of the past weeks etching deep lines on her face. As our eyes met, there was no warmth, only the cold fire of mutual betrayal. "Tom," she began, her voice steady despite the visible turmoil, "before we finalize everything, there's something you need to know." I took the seat opposite her, my posture rigid. "I'm not interested in your excuses, Rachel." "It's not an excuse," she replied sharply. "It's about Michael and me, and why we did what we did." I laughed bitterly. "What possible reason could justify your betrayal?" "It started as a way to help you," she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. "You were so buried in your work, so distant. Michael approached me with a plan. He had connections, investors who were interested in your project ideas. He thought if I got close, I could sway them. So, you slept with him to help me?" I interrupted, the sarcasm dripping from each word. "Do you expect me to believe that?" "It wasn't supposed to go that far," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But things got out of control. We never meant to hurt you." The room spun as her words sank in. The deceit was deeper than I had imagined, a tangled web weaved with the thread of supposed goodwill. "You used me," I stated flatly, the realization cold and sharp. "You both did. We thought it would benefit you in the end," Rachel tried to explain, her hand reaching across the table, only to be met with my disdainful gaze. "I don't need your tainted help, I snapped, pulling back. You've destroyed everything. The lawyer cleared his throat, signaling it was time to proceed. Documents were signed in a heavy silence, each signature sealing the end of what had been my life. As Rachel left the room, her parting glance was filled with sorrow and regret. But I had no room for either. I only felt the burning need for retribution, now more justified than ever. The following days were a blur of action. Using the last of my resources, I made sure that Michael's professional demise was irrevocable. A few strategic calls to expose his fraudulent attempts to rope in investors under false pretenses were all it took. His career was over, his reputation irreparably tarnished. But the final act of revenge was reserved for Rachel. Through anonymous tips, I leaked the story of our personal and legal battles to the press, focusing on her role in the deception in her affair. By the end, she was more pariah than person, a social outcast in the community she once thrived in. Alone in the aftermath, the victory was hollow. The office was quiet, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of my vengeance. The shadows seemed to mock me, whispering of the emptiness that victory had brought. There was no joy in this end, only the bitter taste of revenge. Months passed, and the city grew cold, the streets a mirror of my own hardened heart. News came one dreary morning of Rachel. She had left the city, broken and alone. Michael, unable to face his downfall, had done the unthinkable, his demise a tragic close to his chapter in my life. The cruel, treacherous paths we had walked led us here, to a place of irrevocable loss and endless regret. Betrayal had bred betrayal, and the cycle had destroyed everything it touched. In the end, the only thing left was the memory of our hatred, a reminder of the cost of deception and the price of a revenge that spared no one, not even myself.